What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be talking about my waiver wire pickups heading into week 13 of the fantasy football season and some potential handcuffs and stash candidates going into the weekend as well. Typically, we do the waiver wire video and the stash video as separate videos, but because this is a short week for the Thanksgiving Day games, I did decide to push these two videos and kind of just combine them, make them one bigger video for you guys today because all of them are kind of centered around players you can pick up and or stash on your rosters heading into the week. So that's what we're doing today. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and start talking about these players. All right, so as I always do, I have a list of players that I think should be prioritized or just waiver wire pickups for players that might be in a little bit of a shallower league, a less competitive league. Usually when we're looking at the waiver wire pickups each week, we're trying to target players that are below that 50% rostership threshold. All of these players are going to be above that, but if they're available on your waiver wire, you should be looking at them and picking them up. These players have been talked about on previous episodes for the waiver wire, or they've also been talked about on stash episodes. These are going to be Michael Wilson, Kareem Hunt, Emmanuel Wilson, Ramondre Stevenson, Sam Darnold, Darnell Mooney, Chris Godwin, Parker Washington, Colston Loveland, and Christian Watson. Now, additionally, I do think that this week's waiver wire is a little bit weaker than we've seen in a couple of weeks, so I did want to give you guys a list of premium handcuffs because I do think we are in handcuff season right now where if you have extra roster space and you don't need players to plug in and play immediately this week, I think these players are worth putting on the back end of your bench if they're available because the upside of these guys becoming league-winning players is much higher than just those 1 week fill-ins that I do think a lot of the players in this week's waiver wire episode are going to end up being is just those 1 week fill-ins. But if you have guys like Algier, Brian Robinson, Blake Corum, Tank Bigsby, Ollie Gordon, Dylan Sampson, Ray Davis, and Keaton Mitchell available on the waiver wire, and you have either the running back that is on the depth chart above them, or you have some extra roster space where you can stash one of these players in case an injury hits the running back in front of them, I think these players are certainly worth picking up and stashing as premium handcuffs because like I said, it is handcuff season going into the fantasy playoffs, and if you can have these guys on your bench before the injury happens, you don't have to worry about wasting priority, burning fab. Maybe you don't even have fab left. Get ahead of the waiver wire with these premium handcuffs. Now let's go to my official #1 pickup of the week on the waiver wire, and to me that's going to be at the running back position. It is Bhayshul Tuten. We talked about him last week. A lot of people wanted the breakout to happen for Bhayshul this week, and he is rostered in 48% of leagues right now, so it is below that 50% threshold that we look for. Now he was coming off of his best game of the season in week 11. Obviously he suffered an ankle injury on that one. He got off of the injury report in practice that week, but it still seemed like it was probably bothering him just a little bit there in week 12. Obviously, as you can see, didn't really score, only 7 carries, 17, total yards in this one, 2.4 yards per carry. Not a great day from Bhayshul Tuten. However, I'm still in on Bhayshul Tuten as a rest of season asset, so somebody I still would be looking to pick up on the waiver wire. If for some reason somebody dropped him, they were, excited about him last week, got disappointed, they're dropping him or he's still available, I'm picking up Bhayshul Tuten for the rest of the season because I do think he still has a role in this offense, and I do still think he can push Travis Etienne for touches. Moving on to my second player, it's going to be at the wide receiver position. I have Andrei Iosivas, wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals here. He goes 4 for 7 for 66 total yards in this game as he was filling in for Jamar Chase, still rostered in 36% of leagues right now, so widely available for the most part. But the thing is, we're going to get another week out of Andrei Iosivas as a starter because T. Higgins goes down in this game here against the New England Patriots with a concussion. It is a shorter week. They play Baltimore this week, who has been giving up some points to the wide receiver position. So I think with a shorter week and some of the other things happening right now, T. Higgins probably is not going to play this week. That would be my assumption. Obviously, we can still get surprised by that. But as of right now, I'm looking at Iosivas as another week of starting reps for him. And I like that because Joe Burrow might be back into the offense this week as well. They said that targeted return date might be here against Baltimore. So give me Iosivas 1 week if you need another flex fill-in at the wide receiver position. I think Yoshi should be just fine for you this week. Moving on to another wide receiver you could pick up, it's going to be Luther Burden here for the Chicago Bears. He goes 3 for 5 for 61 total yards in this win against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's only rostered in about 21% of leagues right now. He has fully supplanted Olamide Zaccheaus as Chicago's wide receiver 3 here on the depth chart, and I do think he's going to continue to be an upside wide receiver over the rest of the year, especially if anything were to ever happen to Rome Odunze or DJ Moore. Obviously, we don't want that to happen, but he also kind of like a premium handcuff to a running back is a premium handcuff handcuffed to 2 wide receivers here in this offense. So if anything happens to them, Brenton should see another uptick in production. And I do think he is a high upside play. Very talented player. Obviously, Chicago thought so as well. And now he's starting to find his way onto the football field. Let's move on to a tight end. I think Brenton Strange is a player that we should be targeting as a pickup as well. He goes 5 for 5 for 93 total yards in a win against the Arizona Cardinals in his first game back here off of injured reserve. Currently rostered in 23% of leagues, and he led this Jaguars team in receiving yards in this first game back. So I think he has certainly showed that he's going to be a player that you can plug into your lineup at the tight end position for the rest of season. The rest of season schedule is pretty good here for the Jaguars as far as tight end production should go as well. So Brenton Strange, if you're looking for tight end help, he's available in 3 out of 4 leagues right now. I would be looking to go grab him and put him onto your team because I do like what we could get from him for the rest of the season. Let's go to another running back that I think you can pick up. For me, it's going to be Devin, Neal, running back for the New Orleans Saints, and he's only rostered in 10% of leagues, goes 12 touches for 61 total yards in this one, 5 for 7 in the receiving game, which is definitely something that I like to see from a PPR perspective. But the reason why we're looking at Devin Neal this week is because Alvin Kamara was forced out of this game with a knee injury, and it does look like, I mentioned a shorter week here with Thanksgiving, you could end up seeing Devin Neal as a potential starter in week 13 against Miami, who has been somewhat vulnerable to the running back position. So Devin Neal, certainly not a priority ad, but if you're looking for speculative ads, somebody who could be a starting running back here this week if you need it, or maybe you have Alvin Kamara and you just need somebody to kind of give you that insurance this week, Devin Neal's going to be your guy because he would be next man up for me here in this backfield. And I think based off of that receiving work that we saw in this game, maybe he's a player that could be flex worthy here in week 13. Speaking of Atlanta, I do think that Kirk Cousins showed enough here to be worthy of a pickup. We talked about him as a stash player last week, I think, on that episode, but rostered right now in only 20% of leagues. He goes 199, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 interception in this game in that win over the New Orleans Saints. And Kirk Cousins filled in as QB1 in week 12 without Drake London in the lineup, and I still think he produced just fine for fantasy football. So this is a player that I'd be looking at as a potential bye week fill-in, maybe an injury replacement in those deeper formats. Maybe you're in a super flex league, or maybe you're in a league that has 14, 16 teams. I don't know. Maybe you guys are playing in those sicko deep leagues. Kirk Cousins could be a player that you could pick up and play, but right now I think he's shown enough to be a fine fill-in for a short-term period of time. So let's go over to Jayden Higgins. Jayden Higgins is a wide receiver I think we should be adding right now as well. He's been a popular player, I think, for the majority of the year on the stash episodes and the waiver wire episodes. He kind of bounces in and out. Nobody really has the confidence to go out and push that roster threshold over a 50%. Right now he's sitting at 24%, but he goes 4 for 9 for 38 total yards and a touchdown on Thursday Night Football versus the Buffalo Bills. And he led the Texans in targets in this one, and he's now seen 7 or more targets in 4 of his last 5 games. So this Texans offense as a whole is very shaky. I think that's part of the reason why Jayden Higgins' rostership percentage never really gets that high, but I do think he's starting to carve out a legitimate role. They drafted him highly in the NFL draft, and he's a player that I would be watching, especially if you need some wide receiver help in your fantasy football leagues. Let's go on to one more quarterback. I do have Shedeur Sanders as a player to be looking at to potentially pick up here this week. He's only rostered in 14% of leagues. They did win 24-10 against the Las Vegas Raiders, and Sanders goes 209, 1 passing touchdown, 1 interception. Now, I will admit, he had a lot more opportunities to score here, but Stefanski and the Browns, they kept doing this wildcat play in the red zone, and it did lead to 2 Judkins touchdowns, which could have very well been passing touchdowns for Shedeur Sanders. Now, that said, Kevin Stefanski, he hasn't announced who the starting quarterback is going to be here in week 13. I will say, I think Shedeur played well enough to be the starting quarterback and keep that job moving forward, but I don't know. It seems like it's always been a little bit weird with Sanders right now and this Browns team. The vibes have always been a little bit weird, so we'll see what happens. Sanders, he's a player I'm adding, though, if you need some quarterback help, kind of like I said with Kirk Cousins, a fill-in, a deeper quarterback format league, something like that, where you need a quarterback play. Sanders is somebody that I think you can look at because he played pretty decent in this game here, and there was more opportunities for some scoring. Let's go to a wide receiver. For me, it's going to be Chimere, Dike here for the Tennessee Titans, rostered in only 23% of leagues. He goes 5 for 7, 44 total yards, and 2 touchdowns in this game. Now, DK's kind of been a big play threat in this offense, and Cam Ward is coming off of arguably one of his best games of the year here in this matchup against the Seattle Seahawks, and I do think that DK is a player that can remain at the top of this depth chart, especially with Ridley out for the rest of the season, and Iosivas still dealing with this hamstring injury. So DK's talented, a big play type of guy. Obviously, 2 touchdowns is not always going to be the norm, but somebody that if you need some flex play help, definitely pick up DK, because I do like what we have seen over the last couple of weeks here from Chimere Dike. Now, my final pickup here in the top 10 is going to end up being running back Zonovan for the Arizona Cardinals, and he's rostered in about 45% of leagues right now. 14 touches for 32 total yards and 1 touchdown in this loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not great. 1.2 yards per carry, not great. 4 out of 5 receptions, that's fine. 13.2 PPR points. I think this is fine for Zonovan Knight. The problem is we've been having to play this Cardinals backfield as a week-by-week basis type of backfield because we do know that Trey Benson is coming back at some point in time. If he doesn't practice this week, however, I do think that Zonovan Knight could be another option for a low upside RB3 type of player in week 13 versus the Buccaneers. So he's a speculative guy. I'm not super excited about Zonovan Knight. I don't think we've seen enough from him to be super excited about him either. Trey Benson is the guy I'm actually excited about in the backfield, but until he gets back into the lineup, Zonovan Knight is going to be a player that we can play as that low upside RB3, like I said, or maybe just a flex play. Now, like I said, we were going to merge the waiver wire and the stash episode together, so I do have some stashes here that are in deeper leagues. Maybe you play in a deeper league, or maybe a lot of the guys we talked about were not available. These would be the priority stashes for me here this week. Just deeper names. Like I said, I'll go through them. Darren Waller's one of them, coming off of IR here soon. Should be a player that is interesting at the tight end position. Isaiah Davis is another player that I think is interesting. Not a premium handcuff because I don't think the Jets offense is as good as some of the other offenses that we showed for the premium handcuffs earlier, but Isaiah Davis is still a name to be talking about. Like I said with Cam Ward, coming off of one of the better games of his season, maybe he's a player you're looking at. John Mechie has been involved for the Jets over the last couple of weeks, got the end zone a couple times. He's an interesting name to look at. Gesicki back in the lineup there for the Cincinnati Bengals this week. Did get involved, and with T. Higgins off of the football field next week, Gesicki is certainly a player I'm excited about stashing. Gunnar Helm's been involved in this Tennessee Titans offense. I think he's intriguing. Dameon Pierce, signed by the Kansas City Chiefs, is going to be on the practice squad, but I do think he might be one of the more talented running backs in this room almost immediately. So Dameon Pierce is a player that I would be looking at as a very deep speculative ad in those deeper leagues. And Teddy Bridgewater at 1% is a player that you can look at if you have Baker Mayfield, because Baker Mayfield got banged up in that Sunday night football game. It's a shoulder injury. We'll see if Teddy Bridgewater gets the start here this week against the Cardinals. But just like those other quarterbacks, if you need some help, Teddy Bridgewater might be a streaming option here in week 13. All right, so there you have it. When you add everybody up, the premium handcuffs, the waiver wire pickups, the priority ads, and the stash candidates, that's probably 25 plus players this week that you can look at adding here on this short Thanksgiving week before we get to those games on Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. So hopefully you guys found something today a little bit informative, maybe entertaining, actionable, one of those things. You just found out something that you didn't know, or maybe found out a little bit about a guy that you might be adding to your fantasy football teams. Do me the favor, hit that like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel. You don't want to miss any future content. We got Q&As this week, so we want to answer those start sit questions that you have, those waiver questions you have, maybe trade questions if this is your trade deadline week, or maybe it hasn't passed already. So do me the favor, make sure you're subscribed as well, and go join our free Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, helping you guys with your fantasy football teams 24/7, 365. But with all of that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today, so I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.